What's up, what's up? It's time for Done Way Past Funny with your host, G.D. Fenderson. Join us as we discuss the arts, science, and business of comedy with comedians and comedian adjacent. With this episode's guest, Big Rich Brock. It's time to get down and get dope with Done Way Past Funny. What's up, what's up? It's time for Done Way Past Funny with your host, G.D. Fenderson. Join us as we discuss the arts, science, and business of comedy with comedians and comedian adjacent. With this episode's guest, Big Rich Brock. It's time to get down and get dope with Done Way Past Funny. Hi, I'm G.D. Fenderson, certified forensic humorist and host of Done Way Past Funny. Thank you for joining us as we continue our interview with Big Rich Brock. Enjoy. Now,
Yes.
I want to talk about your dry bar special, but since I have a portion of it here, I'm going to play some of that now for the audience.
Okay, sure.
And then we'll talk about which one, we'll talk about it on the flip side.
Hey, whatever you'd like to do. Sure show,
All right.
brother.
All right. Oh, don't tell me I did it wrong. I couldn't have done it wrong. Oh, I know what I did wrong. Remember earlier? Now I did it. I pushed the wrong clip. I have my introduction here. Here we go.
Nice.
Because I have something. I want to ask you something about your website. But here's the first bit. Here's the first bit.
But I am an only child, and I know for you folks from Utah, this is like a unicorn sighting right here. Being an only child. But my mama said, when you have the best, why have any more? My daddy said, don't kid yourself, boy. We're scared to death. Have another one after raising you. I love my mother. But being an only child, it's only good 2 days out of the year. Christmas and your birthday. Rest of the time, it's not very good, and here's why. When you're an only child and anything goes wrong at the house, guess who gets the punishment? Little Richie right here. I figured out I took several whippings from my father for things that my father did. I remember one time I said, Daddy, I promise I did not do that. He goes, I know you didn't. I did it. I'm like, well, why am I getting the spanking? I don't want your mama to know I did it. Then he would give me this logic that I'm sure you've heard before. You probably did something that we didn't catch, so let's just call it even. Then every once in a while he would say this, and I actually use this on my 3 children. I hate to tell you, son, this hurts me. This hurts me. This hurts me. But like my middle child said, not in the same place, Daddy, not in the same place. Being an only child at your birthday was wonderful. The best birthday present I ever got in my life. You got to remember, I grew up in the 1900s. So it was a bicycle, a Schwinn. I got a Schwinn 10-speed, Royal Blues.
And I'm just the audience knows. Wait a minute. You can't leave the story like that. I will finish that story. Well, Rich will finish that story on the other a little bit. I have the rest of the story.
I thought you cut it off. DG, I thought you cut it off, GD, because you're a huffy man.
Oh, no. We had a Schwinn. Well, my first bicycle was a hand-me-down.
Yeah.
So it was a girl's Schwinn because the oldest kid was my sister, and
sure.
I got her bicycle. I had so many girls things growing because I was the youngest.
Oh, You just glad to get something that still works.
Yeah. I mean, I'm an only child now, but
yeah.
But I wasn't then. I mean, my first leather coat was a girl's leather coat. It was my sister's.
Is that button the other side?
It does. It did. And my mother kept saying, well, don't button it. No one will know.
Oh, that's Italian.
Yeah.
That's
It's like,
French. Yes.
yeah, it's like they drive on the other side of the road. They button on the other side of the coat. So yes, the next bit, I, well, the guys, I liked it. I laughed out loud, especially with the
Thank
second
you.
part. The second part for this. Now, I want to ask you about the dry bar. I have my questions here.
Sure.
Okay. The title of the dry bar special. That's why I'm not a preacher anymore. Why that title?
Well, I tell you what's funny, and much like in sermons, the title's everything.
Yes. Yes.
And I'm going to, hey, come clean. I didn't come up with that title.
Okay.
I came up with because my catchphrase is currently and has been since I started is "Come on, somebody,"
Right. And that's
and
what I thought it was going to be. That's
and
what I
that's
thought was
what
going.
it was titled.
Okay.
And I titled it, and I couldn't believe they approved it. To be honest with you, I was kind of surprised because "Come on, somebody" can mean different,
Yeah.
several different things. So they approved it. They that came out. I'd been doing stand up for. I recorded that 8 months into doing comedy.
Okay.
So I watched that and it's a great memory, but I also know I think I do so much better now
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
what I did, 8 months in. I'd love to do that all over, the exact same set, polished the way I do now. But that came out. It was "Come On Somebody," Big Rich Brock comedy. And I think in the first year, it had 300, maybe 350,000 views.
Right.
Then they released it on YouTube and changed the title to that.
Oh, okay.
Why I'm Not a Pastor Anymore, or Too Funny for Church. And my viewership doubled.
Wow.
Same set, but it doubled. And I know it's that title because that makes you, oh, why is this guy not a pastor anymore? Let's listen. Or Too Funny for Church. Let's see what this is about. So the good folks at Dry Bar, somebody, I give them all credit because they came up with that. And I don't know if it was our producer or whoever it was, but the Dry Bar experience for a guy that had been in church world with the mega churches and traveling around and doing the big time church stuff, I was as impressed with Dry Bar as anything I've ever done.
So you did that relatively early in your
Yes.
comedy career.
So early, they didn't know it was that early.
Oh,
Because,
okay.
I was in my 50s and I think they thought I'd been doing it a while.
Well,
And
yeah.
what
I
I
yeah.
sent them was polished enough. And then when I got there, they're like, "Oh, how long you been doing this?" I said, "About 8 months." And they said, "Well, really?" I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, normally we wouldn't hire anybody that done this for 8 months, but you've been speaking for a living for 30 years almost."
Right.
And it's, so yes, let's do it. They do a little clip when you first get there. The way they do that now, or they did my season, I was on season 12,
Okay.
and they have three comics on the show, and you do two shows. You do 28 minutes, 25 to 28 minutes per set. They film both, and then they pick the one that they like best, or worst case scenario, they added them together.
Yeah.
For me, they picked the second one that
Oh,
I did. Only time I've really been nervous doing comedy was the first show there. And it was, I think what got me, GD, was the fact that this was my goal 5-year plan.
right.
And here I am 8 months in. And I'm like,
Right.
what the hell am I doing here? How did this happen? And then once I got my feet under me, and I'm so glad we did two. There was a guy on there with me. He forgot his set two
Ooh.
minutes in
Ooh.
for like 30 seconds of silence. And he was before me. And I'm like, oh, geez, man. And I'd never met him, but we knew his set because we heard him rehearse.
Right.
So the other two comics were in the green room saying the name of his cat because he couldn't he couldn't remember, trying, hey, it's, Felix, 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 and he got it. They edited all that out, and his set's as good as. Thank God for the power of editing. And so yeah, but Dry Bar was a very good experience for me.
Now, I'm gonna were there any jokes that you wrote specifically for Dry Bar? But I guess you didn't
Um,
really have to because you're pretty much a clean
yeah,
comic anyway, and Dry
they
Bar is very
yes,
clean.
it's clean. They don't. If you talk about God, you better be praising him. You
Yeah,
don't use oh God. I'm big where I say my God a lot, like my God, but I don't mean it like negative. I have people call me out on it. I don't get, for your listeners, and let's hopefully keep it this way. I don't get a lot of hate mail, but
right.
I do get praying for your soul cards.
Yeah,
'Cause they're like,
bless your
oh,
heart.
Pastor, yeah,
Bless your heart. Yeah.
Pastor Brock, why don't you, you should be, you're up here talking about comedy instead of, but the one thing that I thought, and I'm glad that's a great question, because that first joke about being an only child in a unicorn sighting, for
Yes.
folks that don't know, Dry Bar's filmed 2 blocks from Brigham Young University in
Yes.
Provo, Utah. So I wrote that joke at breakfast that morning. I'm at the hotel, and I'm staying across the street from the comedy club or studio, and there's a group of, I mean, hundreds of kids that are at BYU for like a church oriented cheerleading contest, like praisers, I think is what they call. They were like cheerleaders, but dance teams and that stuff.
Right.
And there's one that sits down, and it's like 7 girls and a little boy. And I just, how are y'all? We're in their mother, of course. And I said, how are y'all today? We're good. And I looked at the little man and I said, one of your sisters on this? He said, all of them. All of them are my sisters. And I said, I'm an only child myself. He looked at me like I was an alien. He said, what is that like? I said, it's only good 2 days out of the year. And I started doing my comedy to him,
Yeah.
but they left. And I'm like, man, when I told him I was an only child, he looked at me like I was an alien. So I used unicorn
You're right.
because it just came to me when I was up there. And because they ask you not to do specific Utah, because that thing goes worldwide.
Right.
So if you're going to do something specific, you better be funny.
Right.
So I came right out of the gates with that. And the other two comics were like, when did you write that? I said, at breakfast. And that just made them mad. They're like,
Yeah. Yeah.
well, that stinks, that you came up with that. But most of that set, I worked that set for 6 months
Oh,
and
okay.
trying to figure out. And for me and for folks I'm more of a storyteller,
Right.
condensing something, when I get a gig at a comedy club and it's 18 minutes, that's the biggest stressor of my month. I would much rather do my shows where I can just do whatever. And
Yes.
if I
Yes.
do 45 minutes or an hour or hour 5, I know where start to finish is, where I want to take you. But when I have to pull a 20-minute set, I'm headed to Florida while this is airing. I'll be in Florida for 8 shows, Memorial Day weekend in Destin. Then I go over to Pensacola, June 1st, and some of that week. And they're 40-minute sets or the 30-minute sets. I've worked harder on those this month
Right.
than I did when I do an hour special like I'm doing in a couple of weeks. So, but yeah, Dry Bar, you're right, being clean. And I don't know what the percentage is, but a lot of the guys that do there are clean, but then there's a lot that aren't, that I meet. Hey, I did Dry Bar, and I'm like, I look it up. I was like, man, I'd have never, put that together. But it's a great opportunity for clean comics.
Yeah.
They've had,
I've been trying to get into. Well, not real hard. I want to do a Dry Bar because I started so late. I will never be famous. So I won't be. No, it just takes too long. I
Yeah.
consider myself to be a very good. Okay, if I were a musical group, I would be a good garage band, a really good garage band. Okay, I'll never be the Stones. I'll never
Yeah.
be Yes. I'll never be Earth, Wind, and Fire. But I'm a very good garage band. Okay, and if you got a good garage band, you'll want to dance. You'll have a good time,
Yeah.
and you won't even realize. I mean, you'll say, "Well, that's not Yes," but it's like you'll even say, "I had a good time." You won't say, they were pretty good for garage band. You just say, I had a good time. And that's
Hey,
my goal.
well, at our age, maybe even a great cover band. Because
Yeah,
I would rather spend $25 and go see a cover band with 400 people than to go see Journey or the Stones and fight the crowd and pay $200. And I'll go, man, that guy's really good. So, I'm with you because I'm like, I'm too, I don't really, I'm not desiring to be famous. I'm desiring to make a living where I can make other people laugh. If I can
right.
do what I'm doing and make a living and justify, okay, I can do this full time, I would love it. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. But maintaining that is a whole, as they say, show business, business is the bigger word.
Now,
I spend
so,
much more time there.
yeah, because matter of fact, one of my questions is and what, before you started doing comedy, okay, what did you think comedy would be like before you started doing comedy? And how has that changed now that you've been doing it?
Like, man, that's pretty heavy question, man. I think well, the people I liked, like when I did my first tape, I sent it to Jeff Foxworthy,
Right.
Dusty Slay, um, America's Got Talent, Dry Bar, and Larry the Cable Guy because he has a network. Um, because those were people I knew. And I thought, I'm clean. Those guys are clean, but they don't advertise they're clean. They're just funny. And Dusty Slade reached back to me the next day, and I laughed because he said, Rich, I wasn't going to watch this because it's 19 minutes long, but you're a former pastor, and that intrigued me. And I watched it, and I liked it. You're funny. You've got your thing going, stick to what you know. I think you've got a great opportunity. You ought to contact Dry Bar. And I said, well, I already have. So then I didn't hear anything from Dry Bar for a couple of months. And I had a show after it. I went to downtown Atlanta, and I laugh about this because I did a show in a wine bar with 45 people at $15 a piece and had a great show. Had to deal with one drunk lady that I got dealt with, and all was well. The next night, I go hear Dusty Slay, 1,000 people, sold out, $45 a pop, and he had the same drunk woman to deal with. I'm like, man, what are the odds? What are the odds? And GD, I stayed afterwards, which I don't normally do, and I
Right.
was a fanboy. I got in line. I just wanted to thank him for it, that kind email he sent me. And when I was going to the line, they tell you you've got 10 seconds, snap a picture, move on. And when I walked up, he pointed at me, he goes, Big Rich. And I was like, wow. He goes, how are you? Tell me what you're doing. And he goes, I've been
And did you
watching
say
you
to him,
on
look, I only
YouTube.
got 10 seconds. Don't waste my time.
Yeah,
No,
no,
no.
I looked at that guy. I looked at the security. I said, well, I guess I showed you. No, I didn't. I was like, so
10
we
seconds,
talked
my
for,
butt.
yeah, we talked for maybe 3 minutes. I said, listen, 2 minutes. I said, you got a lot of people. Thank you. And he goes, hear from Dry Bar. I said, no. He goes, keep trying. So I did. And within a month, I heard from Dry Bar, and I signed the contract with them, and I picked my date, and then I flew out to Vegas, checked out Vegas, worked my way over to Provo, and did my show. And I really thought that Dry Bar would change my life
Right,
because I didn't know it.
right.
What it did for me, and somebody gave me some good advice later that did one. They said what that credit does is that gets you five, that gets you more money on your tickets that you're selling, and it will get you in the door to places that you couldn't get in before because they see that credit. And the church world loves it too. So
Right.
it, you make a little bit of money off of it as they watch it, but I haven't got into that area yet because you have production costs. You don't
Right.
pay anything out of pocket.
Right. You reimburse. They have to.
Yes, yeah,
You don't
out of
see
the
anything until they get
residuals.
reimbursed.
Yes,
Right.
and I got a little ways to go, but if you guys will watch it twice, tell somebody else, we'll get there. But that's kind of how I got started, and what Dry Bar meant to me in that, and other comics giving me a little encouragement.
Now, having done traveled around, what is the best smelling place and the worst smelling place you've ever performed in?
Oh Lord, the you know what's crazy? I can tell you the worst right off the top of my head.
Most people
I'm going to
can.
start. I'm going to start with best first. Best, I would say, yeah. There's a winery called Big Door Vineyards. Now
Okay.
it's in White, Georgia, but don't let that alarm you. That's only the named after a dude. Um, that winery is my home club, so to speak. I don't have a comedy club I work out of. I have that winery. I've done 40 shows over there.
Wow.
If
Okay.
I'm in town, I host bingo night. If I'm in town on Monday, that guy believes in me, the owner. Um, finds me little things to do to help me if I don't have a show booked. And that winery is beautiful. It's a full blown working winery, so it smells great. It's got pretty women around, so it's got great views, nature wise, people wise, and just a good vibe. So, Big
Right.
Door Vineyards, White, Georgia, right off I-75 is my favorite. Worst smelling. Worst smelling was I went. I've done a few feature spots, and most of them have been with one or two guys who they'll feature for me, I'll feature for them.
Right.
On Good Friday, Good Saturday for Christian folks, Good Friday's right before Easter. This was the Saturday in between. This guy calls me and says, "Hey, are you off?" And I said, "Yeah, I didn't book nothing Easter weekend." He goes, "I got a gig at somewhere in Alabama, not to be named." And he goes, "Can you go with me and do 30 minutes and I'll pay you this?" And I said, "Sure, let's go." Well, we get over there and it's called like something arena. So when you hear the word arena,
Yeah. I'm thinking already. Yeah. I'm
yeah,
thinking like 5, 6, 7,000 people at least.
well, you keep thinking it. You keep thinking it, GD. That's what I thought. Big Rich thought, at least 1,000. We get over there and it says, "You are here." We're not there. I'm looking around. There's nothing except highway and fields. He had never been there. One of those booking kind of deals. And I go off road about a quarter mile and I come across 9 trailers or mobile homes, single wides for us Southern people. And in the middle of that was a metal building and it said arena. And under it, it said live wrestling, weddings, and other events.
And you were
And I'm
other
like,
event.
I prayed to God it wasn't live wrestling or wedding because I didn't want to do either. I would have wrestled not to get married again. I'm telling you. So we pull up, and when we go in, it's there. There's no floor. I mean, it's just dirt floor with a wrestling ring, and it's got like indoor outdoor carpet everywhere,
Right.
and it's got 500 seats. But they're taken from every place within 3 counties that have given away chairs.
Okay.
They got them. The
So it
baseball
wasn't. There
field,
were no matching sets.
no, none. Maybe two, none. And we walk in, and I'm like, "How many tickets have you sold?" And the owner says, "We're a cash only business." So I'm thinking, man, is this a meth lab? I mean, what are we getting into on Good Saturday? And the guy that booked it, it's like, man, there'll be somebody, surely. We wait an hour, there's nobody there. Nobody came. He got us paid, and he's trying to figure out how to leave. And the 4 workers were like, are y'all ready to start? We want to show. And I said, sure, let's do it. And the guy that I came with was like, what the heck are you doing, man? Well, they want to show, and they paid
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
And I drove. So you're in. And, you know, I did. And it was in a wrestling ring with the ropes down. So we're up there, and that wrestling ring smelled like blood and urine and sweat, and the whole place smelled the same. And I knew all 4 people because I've been talking to them for an hour. I
Right.
knew their names, I knew their family history. So I did 30 minutes, and I called each of them out in what I was doing. They had the time of their life. And then when I was done, I handed the mic, I introduced the headliner, and I said, good luck. And he looked at me like, because they knew I was a former preacher, and I did more of a, preaching style, getting them into it,
Right.
that kind of thing. And he's very, while we work well together, is he's very, low key, standard delivery, talks like this. And I'm all animated up in his business. So, but that place smelled god awful, god awful.
Mm.
And we were there way too long, and they haven't invited us back though. We didn't draw nobody. So yeah, that's definitely the worst. That was a long answer, but Lord, I can see it like, oh, I smell it like a mare right now.
Yeah. Well, that's why you see when I ask comics that question, I get a look like why, but that's because the sense of smell is the most
Yes,
triggering of the senses that we have, and that's why I asked that
it
question.
takes you there. It takes
Yeah.
you there.
Hi, I'm GD Fenderson, certified forensic humorist and host of Done Way Past Funny. Thank you for watching our continued interview with comedian Big Rich Brock. Please come back to watch more of our interview with Big Rich Brock, and when you come back to join us, bring a friend.